What did you do? You didn't do anything in terms of looking at speed, did you?
No. Aside from driving the road myself and recognizing that with the horizontal and vertical curves out there, I would find it unlikely that the 85th percentile speed, which would mean that that's the speed at which 85% of the drivers are traveling at or below, would be at that 50 mile per hour limit in this case.
How many times have you driven Nicodemus Road in the last 10 years? This section?
This section, probably about 4 times.
Okay. Where does Nicodemus Road begin and end? Do you know?
It's, off the top of my head, I do not.
I mean, you testified about a rural collector and how it's designed to do things, but it actually goes almost all the way across Carroll County, does it not?
It does, but it has intersections with some major arterial roads in between.
Yes, it does, doesn't it? 97 and 27
Yes.
being 2 of them, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, again, you said that your expert opinion is people are probably driving near the speed limit. I want to understand the basis for that. And well, never mind. You said it's because the road's curvy and it has vertical over. That's the basis for that opinion. Is that correct?
It is, yes.
Okay. Now, what's your basis for for concluding that? Have you had other roads that are curvy and hilly and you've done studies where people don't drive over the speed limit?
Yes, and again, we're not necessarily saying that the design speed is 40. We're thinking that the design speed is going to be less than 50, which is that plus 10. You know, again, it's critical to find the appropriate design speed in this case because there's going to be other implications to clearing too much of the embankment from a drainage and an environmental standpoint. We want to make sure that we're doing this site to satisfy the criteria set forth by the Bureau of Engineering.
What is the design speed that Carroll County's requirements use for calculating site distance?
In the absence of a speed study, it would be the posted speed plus 10 miles per hour.
So that's 50 miles an hour, right?
That's correct,
But
yes.
your entire testimony is based on 40 miles an hour or less, correct?
Again, the testimony that I'm giving is that that the speed limit or the site distance could be increased if embankments are cut away to increase the ability to look to my left or look to my right. That can be done through the clearing of vegetation or roadside embankments as necessary.
Do you have any idea whether or not what Carroll County will development review or engineering will do with regard to this matter if this is approved by this board?
So typically the process would be we would collect that speed study along Nicodemus Road to measure that actual 85th percentile speed. We would use that as a design value as what would be required for the actual site distance. So if the design speed comes back at 50 miles per hour, we would ensure that the adequate site distance is available to achieve that required site distance at 50 miles per hour. Again, that's something that can't be done yet because there's embankments there. I can't measure, what it would look like with that gone. So again, we're just relying on the fact that there could be changes to the road system by the applicant as part of the approval process of this project to ensure that adequate site distance is available to satisfy county requirements.
But that process won't be undertaken unless this board approves this use, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. And if this board does approve this use, you will go to development review and engineering and say, we've got an approved use here. You must work with us to attempt to meet these standards. Is that correct?
We will meet the standards as required, yes.
Have you ever been involved in a situation where a use could not meet the site distance standards?
If a use can't meet the site distance standards, it couldn't be approved if there wasn't a variance or something else through the Bureau of Engineering.
Well, does the Bureau of Engineering have waivers and variances for site distance?
They do, yes.
Yeah. And they're commonly asked for, aren't they?
I have never personally asked for one through Carroll County.
But you know there is a process for that, correct?
There is a process, yes.
Because certain properties just can't meet it, can they?
Certain properties can't, but again, in this case, that's not the case here. We believe we can meet it by cutting back the embankments along Nicodemus Road.
What work have you done to determine that in the last 2 weeks or so?
Understanding that the right-of-way is available, and in speaking with CLSI about the potential remediation measures that could be undertaken in order to satisfy Carroll County criteria.
Is Nicodemus Road a single-lane road with no shoulders there?
It is a single lane in each direction with no shoulders, that's correct.
Where's the right-of-way there?
It's shown on the site distance exhibit, I believe.
Well, show me where it is. Tell me what it is.
So,
I mean, does the applicant own or control property that you're testifying here would allow her, if she was forced to cut back vegetation and slopes enough to meet site distance?
my understanding is that adequate right-of-way would be available based on the plan that CLSI prepared with public right-of-way would be available to achieve that adequate site distance, even for a 50-mile-per-hour design speed.
She owns a 50-foot strip almost adjacent to this driveway to the, I'll call it the west. I don't know if I got my, but left if you come out of the driveway. She owns a 50-foot strip, does she not?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Do you know if that's part of the right-of-way the CLSI says can be used to achieve site distance here?
I don't know.
Have you been asked to study whether or not a driveway located in that 50-foot strip would meet site distance and be safe?
We've not looked at any alternative driveways. Again, our goal is to satisfy the site distance requirements at the existing driveway.
Okay. Now, you use trip generation figures based on the number of students, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Is there does the, what's the book? The AASHTO book?
This is the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation.
Okay, and that's the same book the Carroll County government uses, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. And does that book allow for some discretion in choosing which use category you use to calculate trip generation figures?
The use category, so like as daycare center or different use, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, we try to match the use to what the closest similar surveys are.
Well, in this case, isn't there a category in that book that talks about using square footage to calculate trip generation figures?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're referring to the different variables. Let me strike that last answer. Yes, there are different variables that one could use to calculate trip generation for a particular site. And, you know, again, students for daycare is typically the most accurate variable. And the reason being is that I think trip generation has found that daycare centers can often be of very various sizes. Like, for example, there could be an indoor gym type facility, which would significantly increase the square footage, or other common areas that would increase the square footage that might not be at all facilities. So therefore, students is what we would typically use for this particular use.
So you did not use the square footage figures in that book. You used the students.
That's right. For this use,
Did you do that because it generated lower trip generation figures?
can I confer with my client for 1 second?
No.
We're going to go ahead. We're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute break.
I would like, but
We're going to take a 5-minute break.
is he allowed to talk?
We're going to call the BZA hearing back to order, and Mr. Schaefer, you were questioning Mr. Wilson?
I think Mr. Wilson was questioning his attorney when we left. I mean, I don't remember, I was asking you about the trip generation figures and why you based them on the number of students versus the square footage of the building, even though the square footage is one of the categories used in the book you used. Tell me that book again. What's the name?
It's the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual.
It's the Bible, right?
That's correct, yes.
And the county uses that also, correct?
That's right, yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
So to answer the question, I was looking to clarify the size of the building, because that was not something we had analyzed as part of this testimony so far. The building is roughly 3,200 square feet with an additional 3,200 square feet on a second level. ITE does provide a trip rate per 1,000 square feet, and that's roughly 11 trips per 1,000 square feet. Doing the calculation for that over the course of the full 6,400 square foot building would result in approximately 70 trips during the morning. It's a little bit higher, it's about 71 trips during the afternoon, and that's roughly half in and half out. Now, the important distinction here, though, is, and this is why we don't typically rely on the square footage of buildings, is that the second floor of the building is completely an activity center. So there's not going to be any students in classrooms in that second floor. So therefore, it artificially inflates that trip rate, because again, there's not classrooms, and other daycare centers might not have that sort of use. Another reason is that if we look at ITE, they have different measures of standard deviation to come up with their come up with their trip rates. And that standard deviation deals with a different dispersion of data. So if I measure one daycare center, it'll have a certain trip rate. Another daycare center might have a higher or lower trip rate. So that standard deviation is a lot lower, which means that the data is a lot more condensed along, that average for the rate per student versus the square footage in this case. It's a much higher standard deviation, which indicates that the trips are much more diverse, higher or lower, because of the different uses that might be, such as that activity center, gym, or those types of facilities within a daycare.
Okay. You're being compensated for your testimony here today on behalf of the applicant, are you not?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And so between the two categories you could have chosen, you chose the one that generated less trips, correct?
I did, and again, that's primarily because that's the better standard deviation and what ITE would suggest we use.
And if you were testifying for me, you would have used the same one. Is that your testimony?
Yes.
Okay. And you also used the average daily trips for Nicodemus from 2012 for Carroll County, 1129, right?
Yes.
Okay. Does Carroll County have a projected ADT for 2027?
I could not find one.
It's 1637. Now, there is a growth factor that you build into all your projections when you do traffic studies, is there not?
Typically, yes.
What is it?
It's usually between 1% and 3% per year.
And you didn't use, if you used that based on the 2012 figure of 1129, what kind of average daily trips would you get?
I didn't do the math on that. Typically, we wouldn't grow that far. We typically would look at a newer volume, and we'll do that as part of the study moving forward.
And forgive me, but did you testify you based this on 60 students?
Yes, that's correct.
Do you know the applicant applied for up to 63 students?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. Where'd you get the 60 from?
From the applicant?
Okay. 8 staff members, is that calculated into the trip generation figures?
It is, because again, the way these trip rates are calculated is that there would be counts undertaken at the driveway of a daycare center. So when those counts are taken, it could include students, It could include teachers, it could include an Amazon driver, it could include anything coming in or going out. So everything that uses that driveway during that peak hour is accounted for within that trip rate.
Okay. I want to talk about speed one more time. When you exit Cox Ridge, from Cox Ridge Drive, if you make a left on Nicodemus, which is, I think, west, do you know how the linear distance from that intersection is to the over vertical, the hill? I call it, is it over vertical the right term? I don't know. You testified about the characteristics of the road. If you look to the left up there, you crest a hill and then you come downhill to Cox Ridge Drive, do you not?
When I'm looking to the west, yes, there's a hill, yes.
Okay. And that's pretty straight shot, isn't it?
It is, yes,
The curvy part is to the east, right?
yes.
And that's uphill, correct? Where it's uphill and downhill, I guess.
Yeah, I believe that's more downhill going to the east, yes.
Well, downhill from Cox Ridge Drive.
The elevations decrease from Cox Ridge Drive to the east,
Yeah. So therefore, you're coming uphill when you approach Cox Ridge Drive from the east.
yes,
And plus, it's curvy.
yes.
So would you agree with me that that section of the road, east of Cox Ridge Drive, is in conformance with your testimony that the road's so curvy and narrow that people won't speed, right?
That's my expectation, yes.
How about to the west, people cresting that hill? Is it still your testimony that it's unlikely that anybody will exceed 40 miles an hour on that stretch?
As I'm traveling in the eastbound direction, I'm still getting into an area where you can see ahead where the road begins to curve, and again, there's no shoulders on the roadway. So as there's no shoulders, that makes a driver feel a little bit less comfortable with speeding as they have the lateral obstructions to the embankments and everything else that's occurring on the sides of the road.
Okay, we're getting a little bit out of the engineering field when we use terms like feel a little less comfortable, aren't we?
Again, I've testified to the fact that we have not done a speed study out here yet, and we will do a speed study in the future.
However, you have an opinion.
I do.
Okay, and you gave it.
I have.
All right. Now, the crash data, is that an accurate database in your experience as a traffic engineer?
Yes.
To actually tell you how many crashes have occurred at a given intersection?
It is, yes. It's basically, it's from the Maryland Open Data Portal, and it's police-reported crashes, which involve vehicles that are, have property damage that's significant enough where they need to be towed from a scene, or if there's an injury or a fatality. So it encompasses all of that crash data. There's not fender benders incorporated in this, but that wouldn't be data that we have any access to whatsoever.
And there's no information regarding anything that's not the subject of a police report, correct?
That's right.
And you're assuming, I assume you're assuming, that the police report every one of those things to that database.
That's our, this is the standard that we have to use.
And does it specify, Cox Ridge Drive is a private driveway. Is that considered an intersection under that database?
So basically, we look at the mileage mark of the road, and it's through a GIS database where we can hone in on any particular section of roadway to look at that crash data, so yes.
Okay. So if we measured approximately 1,300 feet from Cox Ridge to the crest of that hill to the west, is that enough time, in your opinion, for a vehicle to stop?
Yes.
Okay.
That far exceeds any stopping sight distance requirement that there would be. In fact, for a 50-mile-per-hour posted speed, the stopping sight distance requirement would be 425 feet. And what a stopping sight distance refers to is a vehicle being able to slow down to avoid a crash if a vehicle were to come out. So for example, if a vehicle were to come out of Cox Ridge Drive, a vehicle traveling along Nicodemus Road would be able to have the time to see that vehicle, slow down, and avoid a crash in 425 feet.
Does that take into account the situation where a school bus is stopped and cars have backed up?
The sight distance, AASHTO requirement is 425 feet for a 50-mile-per-hour design speed. So they would have to see that school bus within that 425 feet.
I'm not talking about the school bus, I'm talking about cars that have stopped waiting for a school bus to load a child or children onto it.
We didn't study school buses or the amount of school bus occurrences that might happen along Nicodemus Road. Again, even with the 2027 projected volume of 1,637 along Nicodemus Road, that's a very low average daily traffic volume, which would suggest there's not a high volume of traffic. So behind a school bus, you probably would not have a large queue of vehicles anyway.
Do you know whether or not that ADT, the average daily trip figure, would trigger the requirement of a bypass lane were this matter to get to the Bureau of Engineering?
We have not studied that yet.
You don't know the answer to that question?
No.
You don't know how many ADTs Carroll County uses to require bypass lanes?
No.
Okay. What is a bypass lane?
A bypass lane would basically be widening of the road to pass any queued left turn traffic accessing a site.
Okay. Now, you've seen the existing driveway, correct?
Yes.
If a car or cars are waiting to exit onto Nicodemus Road from that driveway, and a car is making a right or a left turn from Nicodemus Road to enter that driveway, do you believe that's an adequate and safe situation?
I do, and there is, Mr. Hackett will testify to potential widening that will occur along the corners of the driveway to facilitate an even safer movement than can occur today.
But you're testifying that even today it's a safe movement without any improvements.
It's an existing driveway where there's no crash data, where vehicles are able to enter and exit.
Have you looked at the landing grade of that driveway as it connects to Nicodemus Road?
I've been out there and driven, yes.
What is your conclusion regarding that landing grade?
It's an existing condition that's out there today that vehicles are able to enter and exit the facility safely.
You think a bus or a truck could enter that and exit that at that landing grade?
I did not study that.
Okay. Did you see any scrape marks in the driveway from cars bottoming out at the intersection of Nicodemus?
I didn't particularly notice that.
I believe that's all I have for Mr. Wilson.
Okay, now, anyone in the audience can go to the microphone, please state your name, address, occupation, and questions of Mr. Wilson's testimony. So no testimony, it has to be in the form of a question.
This is not my client.
I'm assuming your clients are all seated directly
Well,
behind
yeah,
you.
they're kinda. But I've talked to her. She's a neighbor, or she's at Salem Bottom, and I suspect she's gonna make a statement, but go.
But I can add a question.
Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So, name is Sue Hartman. I live on 2744 Salem Bottom Road. Been there for 17 years. I've ridden that road thousands of times in 17 years. It's a main artery to go to Eldersburg and to Westminster. And I can tell you, when you're coming around the curve going west.
Question, that's testimony.
Okay,
Questions
I
of
want
Mr.
to get to my question at the
No,
end.
no,
Oh.
question. You don't preface your question, go ahead and ask him the
Okay.
question.
Have they evaluated anything with ice? Because I can tell you, ice is a big problem on that road. We avoid that road
Okay,
when there's ice.
let him answer the question.
Okay.
We have not.
Okay.
Ms. Hartman, the order that, you want to explain to her?
Yeah, for those of you that haven't been to a BZA hearing before.
I've not.
And so our process is the applicant presents their case, calling witnesses. Everybody gets an opportunity to ask them questions of their testimony. Then Mr. Schaefer will go ahead and call, I'm assuming, a couple of witnesses. Anyone in the audience can ask them questions of their testimony, and also the board gets the opportunity. And then at that point, anyone in the audience can go to the microphone and make comment about the case that does not have to be in the form of a question. But at this point in time, the rules of the game are ask questions of the person that just testified.
Okay, I'll be back.
Okay, and that's fine. We fully expect that. And we encourage that. Okay, any questions of Mr. Wilson's testimony? Board members?
None.
Go ahead, Mr. Snyder. Yes?
Just for, so I understand, when you talk about line of sight, that's being measured from the front of the car, or from your eyes in the car?
So basically, it's a measurement that's at 3.5 feet above pavement height. That represents a driver eye height. And we're looking for an object that's 3.5 feet down the road, so 3.5 feet up above the road. So in this case, you know, the measurement is restricted by the vegetation and embankments that are along Nicodemus
I
Road.
understand that. The question I had was, is it from my eyes? What I'm saying, if I'm sitting in a car, it's from what I'm seeing, not the front of the vehicle.
That's right. So again, the requirement in Carroll County is that you're 15 feet back. So I'm taking that measurement 15 feet back from the edge of the road.
Okay.
A more typical driver would be driving forward of that if they can't see to about a distance of about 7 or 8 feet is what the front of your car to where your eye actually is.
In your testimony, in the static state as it is right now, what gives you the appropriate amount of sight? How far back?
So if I'm sitting 8 feet back, I can see about 380 feet to my left. And that's right about at a 40-mile-per-hour design speed, which is the posted speed of the road. So that's without any additional modifications or changes to the embankments. It's getting a little closer to the road than Carroll County would typically require, but it's with no additional modifications to the embankments.
So at 8 feet, and you'll be talking about me sitting in the seat of a car, 8 feet back from the edge of the road.
That's right.
Or the entrance to the road, if you will. And if a car is, let's say, 7 feet in front, so I'm actually like a foot or two off the travel portion at this point, to be able to accomplish the required sight, is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, good. In your calculation for the number of trips each day, was any consideration given for concurrent activities? Meaning, is the only thing going on there at that point in time the daycare center, or are there concurrent activities that will be occurring at the same time?
My understanding is that the daycare center will be the only operation going on at any given time during a typical weekday.
And I guess this might go to Mr. Hackett, because we'll talk about, more of the civil engineering side of the equation. But the sight line issue, is it able to be mitigated? And meaning, does the property owner have access to the property or own the property needed to be shaved back if necessary in order to accomplish the appropriate amount of sight line?
My understanding is that either the property owner or public right-of-way is available in order to achieve it.
And I'll validate that with Mr. Hackett, but thank you for answering. That's my question.
Yeah, I've just got a couple, Mr. Wilson. Thanks for your testimony today. And this may have been covered already on Exhibit 7, where we have the cars coming into the circle. And I can't remember, I don't know, is what the width of the existing lane coming into that circle. We've got the entrance coming in from Nicodemus, proposed 20 feet, and then 18 from what you said earlier. And then you're coming to the circle. So is the circle going to also be 18 feet wide, or
I'm going to have to defer that to Mr. Hackett.
we don't know yet?
Yeah, I'm going to have to
it's
defer it to Mr.
going to be
Hackett.
discussed or something, right?
What I can say is where there's going to be two-way traffic approaching, that's where it's going to be widened to 18 feet as you're approaching the circle.
That'll be your
for that.
determining factor.
Well, correct. And that was one of the concerns that I had in looking at this earlier, is that that's where it got a little bit narrow in that area right before, the daycare center would sort of split off. That's where it was a bit narrower, and that was a concern that I had, where for a single use and common driveway, that was appropriate. However, for the amount of cars that are associated with the daycare, where you have traffic going in and out, 18 feet is perfectly adequate for those two cars to pass in either direction.
Right. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Mr. Caldwell?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Dents? No. Okay.
One follow-up.
Okay, go ahead.
Did your study take into account the 3 residential users that use that driveway?
It did not, no. We were basing our trip generation on the increased trips associated with the proposed use.
But there would be trip generation figures associated with residential uses, correct?
There would be, but it's minimal. Again, for 3 residential units, that's going to be roughly, 2 or 3 trips in the peak hour. So it's a small amount compared to the daycare as well.
How about the graduation parties and the poker games and the anniversaries? That's just not, how's that work? How's that taken into account?
Are you referring to the private residences?
Yes.
Again, that's an existing condition that's out there. Presumably, that wouldn't be occurring during the AM or PM peak. And even if it did, there's still adequate width within the driveway, as I just testified to accommodate two-way traffic going in and going out.
But you do admit that those uses, the 3 residential uses, would add AM and PM peak hour trips to that intersection, do you not?
Yes.
You don't know how many, do you, as we sit here today?
Well, again, roughly from a trip generation standpoint, 3 residential units is going to be about 2 or 3 trips during a peak hour.
Okay, so we can add those to your trip generation figures.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, any follow-up questions, board members?
No.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you.
Alstone, you want to call your next witness?
Absolutely. At this time, I would like to call Martin Hackett to the stand. Okay. Mr. Hackett, would you mind stating your name and address?
Yes, Martin Hackett, 439 East Main Street, Westminster, 21157.
And Mr. Hackett, can you tell us a little bit about your background as I hand your resume over to the board?
I'm president of CLSI, local engineering consulting firm. Been managing the day-to-day operations probably going on about 25 years. I've been there for 37 years. And I've been testifying in front of boards and circuit courts and stuff in the region. I couldn't count how many times. And I'm been considered an expert in land planning, land use consulting, and site design.
Yeah, and I don't have any objection to him being qualified as an expert in those areas he just named.
Mr. Hackett, you can no longer claim to be the audiovisual specialist in the room because the equipment that you were specialized in is no longer here.
I know it's not. I missed the overhead projector, trust me.
What were those areas that you said? Land planning?
Land use consulting and site design.
Thank you.
Do you want to enter Exhibit 10 into evidence?
At this time, I'd like to enter Exhibit 10, Mr. Hackett's resume, into evidence.
No objection.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll accept that into evidence.
Okay. I guess at this time, we should probably go back and also move to admit some of these other exhibits into evidence.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine with me. I assume you'll put them in front of him and have him explain them.
That's correct, sir.
Okay.
All right. So again, I would like to ask that Exhibit 6, which shows a widening of the driveway, would be admitted to evidence. This is prepared by CLSI. Mr. Hackett.
I apologize, but
Yes, sir.
Normally, they're asked to be entered into evidence after the,
Voir dire.
after they're authenticated by Mr.
Understood. Mr. Hackett, can you confirm that this this document marked Exhibit 6 was prepared by CLSI?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have personal knowledge of how this document was produced?
Yes, I do.
Can you put that on the screen?
I can. Slowly. All right. This is what I've labeled as proposed driveway diagram or driveway exhibit. My copy is marked Exhibit 6, and I believe that's also how it's marked in your copy, Mr. Schaefer. Okay, so you do have personal experience with this drawing, with this diagram?
That's correct.
Okay. Can you testify to the validity of this document?
Yeah, we prepared this, holding basically the eastern edge of the existing driveway and widening it out throughout the property to where the property enters into the subject property and the use to 18 feet. The existing driveway ranges between about 17 feet out toward Nicodemus Road, drops down to about 14 feet in the narrow areas as you're entering back into toward the use itself.
Excellent. At this time, I would ask that this document marked Exhibit 6 be admitted as evidence.
I'm sorry to be a pain, but I'd like to know what it shows. Maybe he just said that and I missed it.
Sure. This shows the
What's the red line, Marty?
Oh, okay.
The red line reflects the actual widening area between the existing driveway and where the 18 feet would take place. We put everything on the side of where Ms. Ballasone owns the strip of ground that leads out to Nicodemus Road. Therefore, whatever we need to sort of shave off and grade to make out toward the entrance is only about a foot, but where we have to add on about 3-4 feet and stuff like that, where it goes back into the site, it actually flattens out from side to side a little better. And we can do all that. Any type of impact or grading will occur in that area toward her property.
Well, what's the R20 rate? That's radius 20 foot, right?
Yeah, that, at the end, right now, it just has a taper, and we're proposing a 20-foot radius to pave around it to clean that area up. It will make the intersection function even better than have it confined with just the tapers. What happens is it goes back to what you've heard as far as testimony, the 15-foot sight line that where you're required to put the 3.5-foot instrument to do the, doesn't work in today's criteria. And the reality is, there's nobody sitting back making the judgment call to move out into the travel lanes of these roadways, sitting 15 feet back because you can't see. They are pulling up there like they have been for years. They're going to pull up there, they're going to look both ways, and there's a much more better sight distance opportunity there to make the maneuvers. That's the reality. This widens that to where if there is some oncoming traffic as well, people turning in, everything past basically where that radius is widens out further than 18 feet. And let me remind you, 18 feet is a number that's established. One, Carroll County has public roads that are 18 feet. And those 18-foot roads, they're open section roadways, which are very similar to what we have here. They also, they're allowed in what you call your smaller subdivisions, less than 280 or 250 average daily trips. That's what that 18-foot road was set up for. It's right in the Carroll County manual. So it's one of those things where we believe that it's going to make a huge improvement to the intersection and functionality of that roadway.
So at this point, it sounds like I'm able to ask questions about the Exhibit 6. So I'd like to take over that questioning, if that's okay.
Yeah, I do not object to the introduction of Exhibit 6 into evidence.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. So we will admit this into evidence. So go ahead, Ms. Malison.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Mr. Hackett, can you explain, you called it it wasn't a flare, it was a taper at the end of that driveway. Can you explain, from your experience, who owns that portion of property?
That's in the county right away.
Thank you. And let me see here. Let me just get movement diagram. Kind of gone out of order here. Give me 1 second. Okay. Marty, we will, Mr. Hackett, we will get to this Exhibit 6 or get back to it, but I'd like to actually go back and talk about the plat that's already part of evidence. And I'm wondering, can you describe the land generally? I have copies if you need it.
Yeah, I mean, it's rolling hillside. It's, call it, I would say 90% or 95% wooded. It has obviously the largest structure, the building itself, and there's some smaller structures located on the property. And it does have a little bit of a stream valley running through it on the western side.
Excellent. Do you know anything about the acreage of the property?
Is it 57 acres? 37 acres.
Yeah, 37 acres.
37 acres.
37 plus, I call it 38.
Call it 38.
It rounds up to 38.
Correct. And can you describe what, if any, existing improvements exist on the property?
The existing improvements, like I said, it has the main building itself, and it has a couple outbuildings. There is an existing ball diamond that's located in one of the very few cleared areas, if you will, of the property.
Thank you. Do you know anything about any pre-existing septic or wells or anything like that on the property?
Yes, there's an existing septic system, and there's an existing well.
Okay. And how about paved surfaces?
The paved surfaces, as shown, they are existing today as far as the parking areas go and the travel ways.
And do you know anything about how many cars that parking lot accommodates?
There's 25 parking spaces, which meets the code. It's one parking space for every 10 children, and one parking space for every employee.
Excellent, thank you. And do you know the current zoning status or zoning for the property?
The zoning of the property is zone conservation.
Excellent. And please confirm that you have been to the property and looked at the access to the site.
I have.
Excellent. Mr. Hackett, have you looked into the turning movements for vehicles turning into and out of the facility?
Yes, we have. We ran a program called Auto Turn. In this case, we went ahead and actually, we ran the turning movements and looked at how we can, how it will function running two-way traffic in and out of the property, which really, it enhanced the functionality of this intersection when we put the radiuses on and brought the paving around to open that access up.
Thank you for that confirmation.
The other thing is the turning movements that we ran, we did it based on a little larger vehicle, which would be basically like your Carroll Transit van or a 15-passenger van.
I just handed you a document that is marked Exhibit 11.
Correct.
I am calling this turning movement diagram. Are you familiar with this diagram?
We are.
Okay. Was this prepared by CLSI?
Yes, it was.
And are you familiar with how this document was prepared?
Yes, as I stated, we used a program called Auto Turn, which pretty much has typical passenger vehicles all the way up to WB67 tractor trailers. And we could run turning movements, and it looks at rear-wheel drags and everything to set radiuses as we're designing parking lots for trucks, or it could be various things, any type of studies that we do there.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to ask the BZA to move what is marked as Exhibit 11, which is a turning movement diagram, into evidence.
Okay, and can you go ahead and approach with Mr. Dixon with that.
Can I object and ask for a brief voir dire on that? Before it's admitted to evidence, I'd like to investigate its authenticity a little bit.
Okay,
What's the program? Where'd it come from?
That is Auto Turn is a program that is very well known in the industry. A lot of engineering firms use that program, and it's, I believe it's a Bentley product, which is tied into our MicroStation, some of our CAD software.
And who in your firm is familiar with using it?
We have 3 or 4 people.
Okay? And you pay for it and it's a software program? Is that how it works? I mean,
That's correct.
okay. And does it involve putting in certain data in order to get the results, or you just push a button and, I mean, how does it work?
Well, what it happens is that it sees your edge of paving and what's designed. And as you sit there and bring whatever vehicle you want into the lane or whatever, you start the process, you basically drive the vehicle visually on the computer, and it runs down through, and as you make the left-hand turn movement and the right-hand turn movement, for instance, an exaggerated would be a WB67, which is the largest tractor-trailer template. It shows the rear wheel drag as it drags, as the maneuver turns right, it'll show the rear wheel drag of the trailer.
But you didn't use that for this, did you?
We used it for a passenger van or a 15-passenger van.
Okay.
We figured if it worked for that, it would work for most passenger cars.
Does it take in, so you're not as old as me, but when I took driver's ed, I was taught that the way you make a turn from onto the street is you pull up to the median point and you make almost a right turn. For instance, Nicodemus Road, if you want to make a left turn into Cox Ridge, you pull up all the way to the middle of that driveway, make a sharp left and come in, not swerve across, not just angle your way in. Does it take that into account?
We did not run the left turn movement only because the left turn movement is more gradual. You have room because you're coming from the far distance. The 2 tight radiuses would be a right in and a right out, the closest ones to the actual paving and intersection.
Does it take into account landing grade?
It does not.
Does it take into account volume?
It does not.
Okay. I don't object to the exhibit coming in with that testimony.
okay.
You need another copy.
And this is the interpreter speaking. The interpreters are scheduled till 11. We were not scheduled for much longer than that.
Thank you.
And we have other assignments directly after this.
We anticipated, Mr. Schaefer, we anticipated this hearing going on all day today, and we didn't have anything to do with the scheduling of the interpreters. That's your client?
And the client is saying, yeah, I called. I called and told them it starts at 9. I didn't think all day.
I thought that the way it worked was that you notified the BZA office that you need an interpreter, and they then scheduled the interpreter. That's not the case?
We get this.
Or
scheduled from
assign- no,
Carroll
it's-
County government,
You get the assignment from Carroll County government.
directly from Carroll County.
I thought so. So, I don't know. The Hirsch is, okay, it's, what time, so you're out of here like now? You got 15 minutes? I could put Mrs. Hirsch, if you want, I can finish the Hirsch testimony. Now, I don't know if you're comfortable with this, but Davy Hirsch is the only one of the Hirsches that's going to testify. He's got a letter he's going to introduce into evidence, as well as a couple other letters, and he's going to state that he objects to the use very, very briefly. If we do that, or, and I don't want to put them on the spot here, because they will then not be able to understand the rest of what goes
They'd have to
on.
leave after that testimony. We wouldn't have anybody interpreting for the rest of the
Yeah,
session.
they wouldn't be able to participate.
And Davey is saying, or maybe the interpreter can just read it real quick, because we have the written testimony here. We can do that.
No, but do you understand that if we do it that way, you will not be able to understand the rest of the testimony today? The alternative is to request a postponement. I don't know if it'll be granted or not, and reschedule at a time when the interpreters can be here for the entire proceeding. I'm sorry to put you on the spot like that, but I don't know how this happened, but I knew that it would be longer than,
Davey is asking, well, and what would you want to do?
Is it true that this gets scheduled through the BZA office, the interpreter?
I have no idea.
No clue. This is,
My understanding is that, just like in the court system, if you need an interpreter, you notify the public body, and they arrange for the interpreter on the public's dime. And I believe that's what happened the first time.
I,
Yeah,
I,
the person that I talked to was Joe Vance, and that's who contacted me as well, through Jason Martin. And both hearings were scheduled for 2 hours, from 9 to 11. The last hearing, and I was here by myself for 3 hours. So I requested a second interpreter to that hearing, but we're still limited to 2 hours.
I don't know what else we can.
I could stay at the last one, it was pretty exhausted, but I could stay, this one I can't.
Do we want to take a recess and talk about this? Or, I don't know how you want to handle it.
We'll just put it off to, postpone it to, our second day in September. And we'll make it all day.
Please request the interpreter for all day too.
I'm waiting for them to figure out what they're doing.
I've got, as you are well aware, there may be others with scheduling issues for the rescheduling, which we always work with in terms of, I'm on vacation that week, let's do it in October or whatever, but I'm not in a position to give you legal advice, but I think that these people are entitled to be fully participants in this
Absolutely,
process.
and that's the consensus of the board.
As their lawyer, I request that they be accommodated.
We're doing it our second day. It's on the calendar. It's a Wednesday, 9 o'clock.
What's the date?
Yeah,
25th, is that correct?
Wednesday.
Well, I've got a client that's out of town from the 20th to the 30th.
September 25th,
Yes.
Wait a minute,
Thursday,
Thursday?
24th.
That's not it.
the 24th.
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 The 21st, we have hearings scheduled for the 23rd.
I don't know, but
Yeah,
this will be
and-
the only
and
thing
this
for
will
the
be-
24th.
This will be the 24th.
My client's out of town. Linda Langen. And then I have another client with jury duty that week. How about October?
How about September 30?
I don't know if we can get the room.
She's not back that day. She's back the next day.
See, I can't, Joe isn't even here today, so I can't commit to a time except our regular days.
Why doesn't this check beforehand?
Well,
And we just find out at 11 o'clock when they're leaving?
they have a
Does the
very,
county have any other resources for interpreters? What I'm saying is, could we break for an hour or
yeah,
so
see
to
if
see
we
if they
can
can
find-
secure
I
an
don't know anything about
interpreter?
interpreters. I don't want to say, because I don't know.
Joe's not here.
Nope, that's right, Joe's not here.
He's not here.
Court system has them, but again,
you have,
But you call the day before.
I
you don't-
understand, yeah.
Okay, so Ms. Vance is not here in the office today. She will be coordinating a date that is acceptable to everyone involved. Is that good enough?
it's good enough, but I think you're gonna have to re-advertise it,
Yeah, we have to if we don't give a date today, then we have to re-advertise it.
which is not the end of the world, but it probably cost $140, or I don't know what it costs, but there's an advertising cost and a little, and administrative work for Joe Vance to do to put it in the paper. But, yeah, I agree with Mr. Dixon. If we don't set a date today, which is fine, we just re-advertise, and then we do what you said, Mr. Chairman, which is, let's figure it out.
Let us tentatively schedule this.
That's not gonna work.
Let me take a 1-minute break. Ms. Vance is calling.
Unfortunately, I have a work event. I will be in Washington State that day, October 3rd.
So
You could zoom-
one of my clients.
You can't zoom in? I'm just,
To this.
the time zone difference, if we started early enough, it would, no, I'm just. Okay, we're gonna have to re-advertise, it seems like.
And I'm fine covering the cost of advertising if it means that Davy and Ann can be
Okay.
present for that. I have no
So,
problem.
so we will go back to originally what I said, and that will be that Ms. Vance will go ahead and contact Mr. Schaefer, Ms. Balisone, and the board members and the interpreters to make sure that, and make sure the room is available, and we'll go from there.
9 to 4 or 9 to 5?
9 to 5. 9 to 5.
I'll let Ms. Vance.
Okay, any other business?
The sooner the better. We just want to get this taken care of.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Would you like me to call Joe Vance, or would you be calling?
No, I'll call Joe Vance.
Mr. Schaefer will be the contact,
I will talk to Joe Vance.
okay? Any other questions?
It's October 3rd. October 3rd, no, wait a minute, we're gonna get a date. I'll call Joe Vance, find out when the date is, and then make sure that she has an
Yeah,
interpreter here. for the entire
make sure
time.
that your client, it suits your clients. Ms. Ballastone, make sure, Mr. Hackett, make sure it suits Mr. Hackett and whatever witnesses, other witnesses you may have.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. We're adjourned.